Hello and welcome everyone to the TLMI printTHINK webinar. Today our topic is Hybrid Printing 101 presented by Domino. I'm Keith Grimm, Vice President of Sales and Operations for LabelTrax and a member of the TLMI Technical Committee. So before we get started, a few housekeeping rules and just kind of get some of that stuff out of the way. If you have any questions in the control panel on the GoToWebinar panel, please feel free to submit your questions. I ask that we will be answering all of the questions at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to answer them or ask them, and then we will answer them then. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to access it on the TLMI website afterwards. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Mike Berry. He's a key account manager for Domino North America. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Keith. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining in here. I'm happy to be able to talk to everyone today and hope to see everyone in person in the near future here. As Keith did, my name is Mike Berry. I'm with Domino North America team here, key account and OEM manager. And I spent a lot of my time dealing with our hybrid partners and hybrid presses in general. So I would like to talk to you guys today about hybrid printing. I've dubbed the presentation Hybrid Printing 101 because we'll be taking more of an educational approach to hybrid printing and talking about, what differs hybrid printing from, standalone flexo printing, standalone digital printing, what advantages does it bring here? So I hope you guys enjoy. Put all the questions you have into the Q&A box there. We'll get to them at the end. I'll get going here. So there we go. So throughout the presentation here, I'm going to address 5 key questions today that have to do with hybrid printing. So first of all, we're going to take a look at defining a hybrid press and just establishing a baseline there of what we're considering a hybrid press. The second is we'll talk about some of the trends that are driving hybrid press adoption in the marketplace and where we think those are going. Third, we're going to look at what advantages hybrid printing brings to the label production process. Next, we'll do a little comparison of production costs and time between hybrid printing versus that standalone digital process or standalone flexo process. And lastly, we'll try to answer that key question of, is hybrid printing right for my business here? So diving right into that first question here, we're going to pull up our trusty printing dictionary and ask that question: what is hybrid printing? And for the purposes of this discussion here, we're going to consider hybrid printing is a press that has a combination of digital printing, typically UV inkjet printing in this marketplace here, with an analog operation such as traditional flexo printing or varnishing, laminating, die cutting, or any other embellishment or converting element, all in a single pass product there. Now, hybrid presses come in many different shapes and sizes, and the manufacturers that supply hybrid presses usually offer the same configuration options as a traditional flexo press or a converting line. And most importantly, these assets can be customized to fit the unique business needs of your business and come up with the configuration of a hybrid press that accomplishes what you need to accomplish. So we're going to take a look at a little bit into what makes hybrid presses unique and what production advantages they have throughout the presentation here of this type of nature. So a little bit on trends first, though. So hybrid presses are growing at a fast pace year over year. So going back a couple of years here, we had a really steady increase, and I know that has continued on over the last few years as well. As far as installations of hybrid units, we certainly see more and more hybrid installations of our press here at Domino every year. Now, as in general, in the industry, as run lengths continue to fall, SKUs increase, hybrid presses are going to play a key role to maintain converter profitability. And really, what's driving these shorter runs and what's driving this need for more digital printing and more digital hybrid printing is the fact that these brands are continuing to increase the number of SKUs or the level of personalization that they use on their labels, which is driving down those run lengths and trying to get to a broader market there. And then, of course, there's the pressures of faster turnaround times and just-in-time inventory requirements, which have really amplified in the last 18 months over the COVID period here. And it's placing more importance on these digital and digital hybrid solutions to answer the call to those needs as well. So taking a look at some of the advantages that a hybrid press brings to the label production processes. First of all, a hybrid press provides a converter a single pass production solution that leverages the advantages of digital printing and the flexibility of a traditional flexo press in a single asset. And we're going to get into those advantages a bit more specific as we go through the presentation here. But this combination of digital printing and traditional flexo and converting elements really opens the door to new opportunities and the ability to win more business. Hybrid presses allow converters to transition even more work to digital because of that cutting down on plate usage and other higher cost fixed things associated with flexo production. And at the same time, they can provide labor savings as you compare it to other process workflows that utilize multiple steps, such as using a standalone digital press and finishing and converting that in a second step process here. And then lastly, one of the more overlooked things is hybrid presses can also eliminate or at least greatly reduce work in process inventory as you're starting with raw material and getting a nearly finished label off the end of a press as compared to that having to go through multiple steps within the facility here. So taking a look at those advantages, I want to now turn my attention to how does this compare to flexo only production and digital only production. So some common questions I get asked a lot when people are considering a hybrid press is, what run lengths are appropriate for hybrid printing? How do production costs compare with hybrid printing versus those other processes? And what can a hybrid press do that a flexo only or digital only press can't do on its own? Now, typically when those questions are asked, a very high level answer is given that hybrid printing sits somewhere in between digital printing and analog printing, whereas, either from a run length point of view or, other points of view, that it kind of sits somewhere in the middle. But really, it's more complicated than that. And you have to answer these questions on a job by job basis and really examine the elements of those jobs. And to understand how to do that, we really have to break what hybrid printing does down into really two key aspects of what a hybrid press does that other presses don't do. So first of all is that fact that a hybrid press has a fully finished product in one pass, that we're doing all the printing and converting elements on a single asset. And the second aspect of what a hybrid press can do is you can produce the image with digital printing, flexo printing, or a combination of both, which really adds some unique advantages to the equation there. So depending on how you break down those two aspects and look at that specific job, the answer to these questions can really vary depending on what those characteristics are. So you could end up with a scenario where a medium or a long run is actually still more advantageous to do on a hybrid printing press than it is on other printing assets here. So really, in order to understand this further, we're going to look at a couple examples. This is going to really break down where those advantages come into play and how we can start to put some numbers together here to see which types of jobs are more advantageous to hybrid printing processes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at 3 example applications, and we're going to take a look at each one of those and compare it into 3 different production processes. That first process there is just going to be a standard flexo press that's going to produce the image a standard flexo way with plates and everything, and then do the converting in line and have that fully finished label with an all analog process. Second, we'll look at a standalone digital asset producing that label and then using offline converting or other steps in the process to fully finish that label. And then third, we'll compare that to the hybrid printing process to see how getting this all done in one pass with the digital asset can really help these jobs shine here. So these 3 example applications that we're going to look at here are particularly advantageous to hybrid printing, and I wanted to highlight these 3 types of jobs because it does cover a wide width of what the label market has here, and these are specifically ones that would be more advantageous to hybrid printing. So the first job we're going to take a look at here is a job that has multiple SKUs with common tooling. The second job that we're going to look at is a shrink sleeve can label. And the third job that we're going to look at is a typical PS label that has process work and a heavy coverage spot color and white ink. And that one's going to get a bit interesting on the way that we're going to break down the way that we produce the image there. So keeping these 3 jobs in mind and these 3 production processes in mind, we're going to jump right into the first one here, which is our multiple SKU job with common tooling here. So this job is, as you see, is going to be the same circle pattern image here. We've got different images for all the different SKUs there. So compared to flexo, looking at this type of job here, digital is going to be the ideal platform because of the short run nature of this multi-SKU job. Obviously, you're not going to need individual plates for all the different versions. And on a flexo press, you'd have to do a make ready on all those different images to get all the different versions out here. Whereas a digital press would just be able to switch from one version to the next there. But where a hybrid press comes in and has an advantage is because these share a common die tooling, maybe a common varnish or laminate or something like that, you can get this whole job finished with a single make ready. And the digital engine will just seamlessly flip between the SKUs while the press continues to print and convert and finish these labels all in line here. So you can run all those additional SKUs of the product in succession, one after another, without stopping the press to change the image as you'd have to do on a flexo press, but still getting it fully converted on the other end there. So the single pass production method is going to cut down on the throughput time through the factory and on the work in process inventory here. So multi-SKU work, that's especially where the SKUs individually are shorter run in nature, is ideally suited for a hybrid press here because you can take advantage of that commonality between the different SKUs on the flexo side of the press, and the digital side of the press can seamlessly vary between the different images here. So shifting over to our second example job, and after I run through these three examples, I'm going to put some numbers up on how the production costs and time actually compare here. But to outline our second job here, we're going to be taking a look at a shrink sleeve can label. Now, just something to note there is that short run shrink sleeve is one of the fastest growing segments in the label market. Data for the last several years of studies has indicated that shrink sleeves continue to grow at a fast pace. And then, of course, as run lengths continue to decrease in general in the market, this affects the same thing for the shrink label market here. So the short run nature of the work, as we're saying this is a short run shrink sleeve job, is not ideally economically ideal for a flexo press, more suited to digital, that we understand. But digital printing has some limitations when it comes to shrink sleeve material, especially these UV inkjet hybrid presses here. So shrink sleeve, number one, requires a reverse print and a last down white. And most digital presses on the market do not have that capability to put a white down last. Second is that white, which is in the last down position, is typically a flood or a heavy coverage. And as we know, with digital printing, if anytime you've got a heavy coverage or something, it's going to lower your crossover point on that label. And then third, that white, which becomes the outer layer of the print there, has to have the proper slip coefficient to apply to the shrink sleeve to the can in the process there. So the digital whites tend to be more tacky. So they make, obviously the specialty shrink sleeve whites that you can use on flexo, or you have to apply another overcoat on it to get that slip coefficient there. So for these reasons, a standalone digital press is not really ideal to printing these shrink sleeve cans because you can't get all of these things taken care of in that process here. Now, this is where a hybrid press comes in because we can print with a hybrid press, most presses on the market, of course, the Domino ones here, we can print this image digitally and get that shrink that we need on the color there, and then use a flexo deck in line to apply that last down white. So we get it in that last down position. And that white can be a slip white that has that proper slip coefficient that we need in line there as well. So the hybrid is going to cut down on the costs of this because not only are we using the right white for the slip coefficient, but number two, it's heavy coverage, and we're going to take that away from the digital ink and move that over to our lower cost flexo ink. So it's going to cut down on the cost in general while still providing all the technical requirements we need from shrink, and at the same time leveraging the advantages of digital printing for that short run nature there. So a really, really unique example on why shrink sleeves are ideally suited for flexo. And of course, like our last job there, if you have multiple cans with multiple SKUs and they share that same kind of white image, if it's just a flood white in the background, that's another advantage that could be brought to that process there as well. And we'll see when we plug in the numbers here at the end where this comes out to. But the third job I want to talk to you is a bit unique and where hybrid printing can come into play with this combination of flexo printing and digital printing, and can really kind of help shift our crossover to another level here. So we're going to take a look at this label here. You can see kind of a standard pressure sensitive label that might wrap around a bottle. Maybe it's even a roll fed label, doesn't really matter here. But as you see, we've got that big coverage of that blue in the background here. And for this job, they've also have a white ink. It's on a clear material there. But as you see, we've got a lot of other colors in there. So this would either be done as a process or a multi-spot job. on a flexo. So what we want to do for this job specifically is I want to take a look at producing this image in 3 different ways. For our digital only process, they're going to take a look at printing this entire image digitally and then doing offline converting. For our flexo only process, we're of course going to print the entire image flexo with as many colors as required here and then do that converting in line. But third, for the hybrid press, we're going to take that image and we're going to split it out a little bit. We're going to take that single heavy coverage color of that blue, and we're going to split that out and we're going to print that flexo in line with the digital on the hybrid press. So essentially, this is going to become a single color flexo job also we've split out that white as well. And of course, the rest of this image here is going to print digitally, which means that if it did vary, we could do that with the digital engine seamlessly back to back. But even if it doesn't here, we're still eliminating on versus the flexo at least 3 or 4 colors of setup here. So we're going to take a look at how this might compare here. So jobs in general, this is a good example, but in general, if jobs contain a heavy coverage spot color and or any other heavy coverage ink such as a white ink can be ideal for a hybrid setup and doing it in this nature and having a combined approach to flexo and digital production. So using this example here, compared to a flexo only job, the hybrid is going to save costs on the plates and the setup time for all those other colors there except for the blue. Compared to a digital only, a hybrid press is going to use far less digital ink to produce this job because we've taken that very heavy coverage out and we've transitioned it to flexo. And only hybrid presses have this competitive advantage to be able to combine these 2 print methods in one process here to complete this label. So additionally, as I said before, the digital can vary SKU to SKU, or it can even be 100% personalized with variable data for each label there without enduring those additional setup costs. So taking a look at these 3 examples here that I've just outlined on why they'd be advantageous for hybrid, now we're going to plug them into our calculator that we use here at Domino to computate production costs, and we're going to see how it actually come through if we line up an example run here of these 3 different job types at various run quantities here. So using our total cost of ownership model, we can examine production costs and time for these jobs, including all the facets of producing this label, which would be both the digital and flexo ink cost, material usage, including expected waste, the hourly rate and labor for running that press, inline versus offline finishing costs, flexo plate usage, and of course, make ready time in general. So once we load those 3 example jobs in and then producing it once again in our 3 different methods here of a hybrid press, a flexo only, and a digital press, we're going to get an output here of expected production costs and expected production time for these jobs here that indicate a wide width of the market that has jobs that are suited ideally for hybrid here. So taking a look at costs first, if we see here on the chart here, the hybrid is obviously won out here against our flexo and digital only costs. So for these examples here and the run lengths that we've plugged in, compared to flexo, hybrid printing is going to provide a 45% cost savings. And this major cost savings is coming from the eliminating of most plates required to produce this work, and additional cost savings in here by reducing the waste required between SKUs and the number of jobs that are being produced here. Now, alternatively, compared to digital, which has to use an offline finishing process, we're going to get a 20% cost savings with this job here. And a major part of this cost savings is from the ink on the shrink and the last example job there that's been split out away from digital into flexo very selectively to only have a minimum setup required on the flexo, but still save a lot of that cost from the digital ink there. And then of course, there's going to be some costs with this being done in an inline process versus a multiple step process for offline converting elements there. So you can see, taking a look at any types of jobs that fit this nature of work, hybrid has a clear-cut winner when it comes to a cost perspective here. But taking a look at time, and the old saying, time is money here, we also get some very significant time savings, which could be opportunity costs to produce other work on those assets here. So once again, using these same examples and plugging in all of our metrics here, we could see compared to flexo, this hybrid asset is going to provide a 40% time savings. Compared to digital that has an offline finishing step, we get almost a full 30% time savings while not having to have that work in process go through multiple steps there. So hybrid in this case here allows work to move through the shop faster, and shifting more flexo work to hybrid can produce more capacity on the flexo presses or even your digital only assets if you have all three of these for more profitable work that is more suited for those assets individually there. So some big time and some big cost savings can come for these types of jobs here when producing min-hybrid in these methods. So considerations, trying to answer that question of is hybrid right for my business? So number one, if any of the example jobs I talked about here today or any of the production methods resonate with the label business that you have or is similar to any of these example applications, you should really be considering a hybrid press for your operation. Also, converters that desire more flexibility and their press capabilities might also want to consider hybrid to have all those different options available like they would have on a traditional flexo press, but with inline, of course, digital printing there. Similarly, converters that like the single pass nature of a flexo press and have kind of built their business and their work processes around that may want to consider hybrid to keep that same kind of process there when entering digital. And then additionally, I always say having multiple press technologies, being a hybrid press, a flexo press, and a digital only press, really can allow you to have all the tools to take a look at every job that comes to your shop and go, you know what, this one should go here, this one should go there, and you're going to be the most competitive possible when you have all the assets there. So I'd say talk to your digital suppliers about what hybrid presses are available. At Domino, we've got several options to work from here and lots of choice for converters. And then the last comment I would make when looking at hybrid presses is uptime is going to be of key importance. You know, if you're going to want a proven, reliable solution, both on the inkjet side and on the converting side, to make sure that this combined asset stays up and running and as profitable as possible. So with that, I hope you learned a little about some example applications of what works for hybrid jobs, what advantages hybrid presses can kind of bring to the production process here. And I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you. Hi, welcome back, Keith.
Great presentation, Mike. Thank you. So we do have some questions here. First question, are hybrid presses easily upgraded?
Great question. Get that one a lot as well. Of course, it's going to vary from vendor to vendor, but I always tell converters to kind of look with the mindset of when you're getting a hybrid press, you're kind of getting two assets in one. You're getting the flexo and converting elements of that, which is going to have, you know, a longer lifetime than, of course, digital presses go through. So you can conceivably, if your vendor supports this type of architecture, upgrade that digital engine over time whilst keeping the rest of the line in place. So theoretically, hybrid presses are very upgradable in that way because you have a lot of the components required there. So definitely talk, you know, to your vendors that you're considering and ask them about what's the future look like, you know, when 5 to 10 years when this digital engine has a much newer version available, can you upgrade without having to get a new press there? So great question.
Okay. Next question is, what's the ideal operator for a hybrid press? A little bit more flexo skill or a little bit more digital skill?
Also a good question. I get this one a lot as well. I would say the real answer is dependent on the type of work and the configuration of a hybrid press that you're buying there. If you're going to be relying on doing hybrid printing with still a lot of analog converting elements, you may want to have someone there that is more attuned to a flexo press, or at least have someone nearby that can help with those setup processes. But in general, I'd say overwhelmingly, the digital press operators that have a little bit of mechanical skill make a really good hybrid press operator, because at the end of the day, the heart of these engines is a digital press, and you need someone that's comfortable running a digital press and that type of operation there. And if you've got someone that has both skills, great, you've got a perfect hybrid press operator.
You know, keep them for life.
Yeah, exactly.
So third question, what's the most common hybrid press configuration?
Good question. Lots of different configurations I've seen, but I'd say in general, if I had to pick a common configuration, it'd be a digital press with at least 1 to 2 flexos on each side of it for doing either some priming or some pre-printing, and then as well as having the ability to do additional spots or overcoats or something on the other end, and typically at least one die station for inline converting, and then, you know, maybe a lamination station. That'd probably be your typical hybrid press configuration. But of course, each one varies a little bit here. It's, like a snowflake.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of go out of order here because I think this follows into the one we just asked. Is in label 3 scenario, what kind of registration tolerances can I expect from the digital to the flexo print?
Good question. Also going to vary by technology as well. So to just give an example of a Domino hybrid press here, we use a inline iMark reader like you would on an individual flexo station. So we hold that registration typically to a tolerance of 100 to 200 microns. Now, of course, you're going to have your similar tolerances with flexo to flexo, but it should be in line there. But I'd say in general, I have seen artwork produced in that nature that lines up with great registration that holds, and you would never know that you're producing that with two different technologies there. But something you definitely want to test, as you're looking at hybrid presses, if that's going to be a big concern of yours and you're going to be looking at doing a lot of work like that, you may want to ask your hybrid press provider there to try a job that has registration, between digital and flexo. But in general, I've seen most of the presses out there do quite well at that.
Okay. Next question. Let's see. Fathom Optics provides software that enables printing of 3D and motion effects by printing an interference screen on both sides of a clear film or by laminating clear film onto opaque structures and printing a screen above and below the lamination. Therefore, we require 2 flexo stations before the digital engine, and the digital asset can overprint color and variable content. We're finding that most hybrid presses have only 1 or 2 stations before the digital press, and they are spoken for by either primers, white, etc. Are there many custom machines out there that have turn bars, lamination stations, or more flexo stations before and after the digital, or are they mainly just 1 or 2 before? Hold on just a second. Excuse me. Are there many custom stations out there that have turn bars, lamination stations, or more flexo stations before or after the digital, or are they mainly just 1 or 2 before and after without the additional functionality that is typical on the narrow web flexo press? So a long question there.
Long question. I would say the short answer is I've most definitely seen large configurations of flexo hybrid presses here. I've seen them upwards of 8 to 9 flexo stations in line with a digital press on the high end there. That's an atypical one. It's not very common to see something like that, but they certainly exist. I've seen them with turn bars to do front side and back side printing, to do backside printing maybe with a flexo deck, front side printing with the digital engine. So I would say please reach out to me if you'd like to talk further on that. My contact details can be provided here through the chat here. I can put it in there, but reach out to me and talk. There's most certainly options out there for you, and I can help you sort that out.
Okay. A follow-up question to that from the same questioner. Second question is, do you have any presses printing digital on both sides of the web to do a Fathom Optics screens?
I've not really heard of this application too much before that, so I don't think we have anyone doing it to my knowledge. Not to say it's not possible. Definitely testing is the way to go. And we have, I know I've seen engines out there that have printing on digital printing on both the back side and the front side. It's definitely possible, but I wouldn't say it's a very common thing, because traditionally most labels obviously have printing on the front side. And if they are doing backside, it tends to be 1 to 2 colors that's taken care of during flexo. So nothing to say that it's not possible. It certainly is. I'm just not very familiar myself with anyone doing that today.
Yeah. So Mike, one of the things, I'm sure this is going to be one that both of you will want to have a follow-up on. You'll be able to find from the GoToWebinar session who asked the question, and you'll be able to reach out to them as well. So hopefully you'll be able to connect with them. At this point, I have no other questions. I'd like to remind everybody on the webinar, I think it's been a great webinar today. Mike, you do a great presentation, and thanks for working with us today. So as a reminder, this webinar was recorded and is going to be hosted on the TLMI website. So I'd like to thank Mike Berry at Domino. I'd like to thank Kyle, the TLMI team, and everybody who registered today. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.